Aohori was brought up in a home different from other people. Her father was a famous erotic author, and since she knew the origins of her name, she has sworn to escape the influence of her father by studying hard and going to a university far from home. However, an obstacle by the name of Takumi Kijima tried every means to talk to her. He eventually confessed his feeling, and it caused Ao's mind to run wild with thoughts of a peculiar nature. We follow the different situations Ao had to face in trying to ward off Kijima, who doesn't stop in his advances, making her not able to study. On a school day like any other, Class 1 a teacher announced the student with the perfect score, being Ao again, much to the amazement of the other students. Some of her classmates wondered if she would ever take a chill pill and enjoy her youth like a normal high school student. But Ao is on a path of delayed gratification by sacrificing her youth for a chance to escape the claws of her parents. Just then, the king of the normies, Takumi Kijima, approached her with his amateur comedic skills. Ao replies him with a quick-witted reply. He doesn't give up, and the incessant pestering like a child beggar made Ao wonder why he was always coming to talk to her. She asked Kijima to leave her alone, and some of his friends heard it, causing them to gather at her table and laugh at Kijima. This caused Ao to spiral into an imaginative deduction that all boys want is to conquer women and ravish their plots to their satisfaction. As Kijima tried to get his friends off his back, he looks back and saw that Ao had discovered teleportation and disappeared into the unknown. This made his friend comment that Ao has always taken the path of Captain Cold towards the boys in the class, but some girls also commented that she doesn't talk to them either. However, Ao was listening by the door and vowed to tell Kijima that she hated him the next time they see. Like a modern-day feminist, Ao-chan hated all men, including the ones in her family. She soon arrived home to meet an extremely dwarfish man with no hair on his head except a sail-looking lump of hair, who she calls father, Hanasaki Hori. The man-child was throwing a tantrum, requesting for a pudding with threats to go to Ao's school if he doesn't get one. Soon after, Ao gave her father the plot-shaped pudding, but she ruined it by throwing the spoon in the middle. The next day, Ao vows to let Kijima know that she hates him. However, her plan was interrupted by the gym coach, who told her to go and give Kijima a spare uniform after spraining his ankle. Ao decided to use the new development to tell him how she feels. Meanwhile, in the clinic, Kijima and his friend were having a discussion and Ao was spying on them. As Kijima saw Ao, he blushed, which made her surprised. She then tried to go with a softer approach, but as she was about to do it, her man-child father appeared like a hidden leaf ninja by the window, cheering her on. She tried to get Kijima away from the scene but ended up almost suffocating him with her plots. This made her quite embarrassed, but Kijima was quite cool about it. Ao tried to go on with her plan but was getting nervous. This in turn made her nervous. As she was about to blurt it out, her father activated phase 2 of his plan, showing her plots to Kijima, but he covered her up and confessed his feelings. This made Ao black out that she couldn't remember getting on the train home. The next day, as Kijima came to greet her, her eyes strayed below his pants, and her face turned the color of strawberry. But she was saved by the homeroom teacher. After school, she asked her father about the possibilities of romantic encounters, but he made her fears worse. Ao then decided to put on an academic busy style, but the students misinterpreted it as her being sexy, as the outfit showed of her figure, which made her self-conscious. Kijima chased after her to apologize and then treated her to breakfast as she missed it. Soon after, they both missed class, and Ao took a very bold decision to check the size of his weapon. As she reached out to find out, Kijima woke up and held her hand in his. Ao then blurted out her inner thoughts, but Kijima misinterpreted them as he thought she was talking about being in a relationship. Ao is moved by his words like a character in a Shakespeare novel. She agrees to take some time to think about it. On the train ride home from school, her words come back to haunt her, and she stares at her phone like a zombie in Resident Evil as she reads the message she received from Kijima. At home, her father asks about the progress with the boy, but he took it too far by offering to throw her into the deep end of his novels. This put Ao in a bad mood, which lasted till the following day, and made her classmates steer clear of her like she had COVID. Some of the classmates looked to Kijima to fix the problem, while they stared at him with the look of a pig in an abattoir. Ao wanted to eavesdrop on their conversation but chose to focus on studying. As she opened her book, she found out that her father had swapped her book with a copy of his erotic training manual. Seeing this, Ao descended into a diabolical imagination. Just then, Kijima approached her and she threw the book at him. However, their books mixed up and Kijima ended up having the manual. This made Ao to meet him and try to retrieve the sacred book before Kijima opens it. As she met up with him after school, they both misunderstand themselves again, but she ended up getting the sacred manual back from him. As she found out that he didn't open it, she became embarrassed by her words earlier and ran like a DC character back to school. Later that night, her man-child father met her reading the book and was proud of her, but she shattered his hopes by telling him she felt nothing while reading it. A couple of days later, Ao told her father that she wants to ditch the class trip for cram school, but her father forbade her, his reason being that it might turn to a full-blown group party. That weekend, the class trip is underway in the mountains, but Ao is determined to discourage anyone from coming close to her, both male and female. As she wandered around, she bumped into Kijima, but she ran away as she couldn't face him. Kijima's friends urged him to look for another girl, but he only has eyes for Ao. This caught the attention of some of the girls, who then rushed after Ao like vultures and tried to get her in the same place as Kijima under the guise of a party. Ao ran to the boys' room to persuade Kijima to turn down the invite, but no one was there. As she moved to leave, the boys approached the door and she had no choice but to become a ninja and hide in the closet. Soon after, some of the boys went to get drinks and Kijima tried to fix the closet door that wasn't closing. As he stuck his hand into the closet, he unknowingly placed his hand on Ao's thigh. This made her want to scream like a happy dog, but she controlled herself. Kijima kept on rubbing the thigh, causing untold waves of color on Ao's face. He then opened the door to see what his hand was on and found Ao in the closet facing him with her posterior while making fake cat noises. Kijima was surprised to see her but told her to leave before the boys come back. However, he was curious about the part of her body he was touching and smelt his hand in response to that. Ao then tackled him like a rugby player whilst blushing. Just then, the boys came back with the girls in tow. Soon after the embarrassing moment has passed, the students snuck out to see the shrine at the top of the mountain. The girls plotted to put themselves in pairs and put Kijima and Ao in the same group. Ao was adamant about it, but Kijima was happy with the selection. On the trail, Kijima wasn't scared, but Ao was jumpy. At the restroom, she got scared and ran out of the toilet with her skirt up to her waist. Kijima was then faced with an ethical dilemma whether to tell her about it or leave it alone for her to find out herself. However, as much as Kijima tried looking away, his eyes were drawn like a moth to a flame. He tried different ways to tell her, but she misinterpreted his words every time. Ao then got angry at his words and tried to go down the trail alone. But before she could take a step, she sprained her ankle. Kijima used this opportunity to tie his jacket round her waist like Prince Charming. He then told her that her skirt was way up. This information made Ao pass out and fall like a log of wood out of embarrassment. A few days passed after the class trip and Ao was laid up in bed reminiscing. Just then her man-child father brought an envelope that contained some explicit pictures of Kijima with a strange lady. The picture made Ao angry and she planned to confront him in school. However, things did not go as planned as she was blown away at the sight of Kijima all sweaty while playing soccer. As practice ended, some of the ladies asked Ao whether her and Kijima were dating, but she responded negatively. Just then one of Kijima's senpai came over and spilled some secrets about him that made Ao's angry, with her eyes ready to shoot lasers. She resolved to never have anything to do with Kijima again and focus solely on her books. As she was about to discard the photo, the true owner of the photo appeared, who turned out to be a former acquaintance of Ao's named Miyabi. Miyabi then informed Ao of her plan to let Kijima fall for her since they were not dating. Later that evening, Kijima tried to explain the situation to Ao, but she ended up making things worse. She then wanted to apologize but couldn't find the words. Soon after, she saw Miyabi talking with Kijima, which made her mind run wild with questions. Later, Ao asked her dad for advice, who then gave her good advice and then ruined it with a little paranoia. The next day, Ao's father used the excuse of purchasing a reference book as an excuse to go on a date with his daughter at the amusement park. Coincidentally, Kijima and Miyabi are also at the park. Hasanaki then proceeded to conduct a recon mission on the other couple and eventually found a way to separate them in the haunted house. He also sent Ao into the haunted house and made it so that they met each other. After their encounter, Hasanaki also planned another surprise that made both of them recognize each other. The amusement date soon wound up to an end and Kijima and Miyabi were on their way home. However, Ao and her father were tailing them like low-budget spies. As she got within sight of them, she found them in a compromising position with Miyabi curled up on Kijima's chest as Ao looked on in amazement. At the amusement park, much to Kijima's amusement, Miyabi confessed her feeling with Ao looking on in the distance like a CIA spy. She looked on as Miyabi kneed Kijima in the privates, then pushed him into the love attraction at the park. Later at home, Ao was worried whether they stayed the night or not, and her mind was filled with naughty scenarios like a Family Guy episode. After her bath, she slept off in the bathtub and awoke to her being on the bed and Kijima being beside her. This left her blushing like a pet that has found its owner. Ao accused Kijima of going with Miyabi to a hotel, and he watched her descend into the dark hole of paranoia and assumption. He then explained the situation, how they were rejected by the hotel and how he tried to get her to help him get to Ao. Soon after, in a fit of passionate argument, he confessed that he was a virgin, and then ran out of her room like a schoolgirl. The next morning, Kijima avoided Ao like she was a carrier of a deadly disease, but one of his friends decided to act as his wingman and put them in a studying group together. As they were studying later during the day, Hasanaki tried to help Kijima with his riz by giving him an erotic conversation starter, but he couldn't use it effectively. After they were done studying, they were going home in the rain. Kijima made a compliments that made Ao apply the brakes on her legs. She then asked a very personal question and tried to backtrack, but Kijima pushed until she started to cry and ran off after pushing him with the force of a Marvel superhero. In a cafe close by, Miyabi sat down to enjoy a cup of tea away from the world, but her peace was interrupted by the wailings of Ao the Virgin Girl. A few days after, a popular event called the Meat Fest was kicked off with waiting ladies dressed in nice attires revealing their plots advertising the programs available. Ao accompanied her father's assistant Yabe to compile data to be used in the next romance novel. However, as they were looking around, Ao lost sight of Yabe and was running around when she ran into Miyabi, who was working for some extra money. Kijima was also working at the Meat Fest, but Ao was more concerned about them being together at such a festival. As she became green with envy, Yabe came behind her and introduced himself as her father's younger colleague. However, Kijima was more worried about their closeness than anything. Kijima and Yabe then began a pissing contest of closeness and Miyabi had to drag him away. Ao then tried to defend Kijima, but Yabe had other ideas in his head that made Ao very embarrassed. Meanwhile, at his station, Kijima was spacing out and burning grilled meat. Miyabi tried to placate him, but he was all about Ao. This got Miyabi to intensify her actions in catching the man she wants. At the festival, Yabe activated his pervy meter and scanned the surroundings for different couples' meat preferences. He used it to judge how far in their relationship they have gone. Ao, however, was in her head thinking about Kijima and his make-believe relationship with Miyabi. Just as she was ruminating like a cow after eating, she said his name out loud, and like a magician, Kijima appeared behind her. Ao became flustered and thought he was stalking her, but he told her that he was on a break and came to find her like a puppy looking for its owner. Kijima then started to ask about Yabe and their closeness. Just then Yabe appeared and called for Ao to follow him. However, Kijima was not satisfied and decided to put on the guise of a character in an English play. He drew Ao to himself and carried her over his shoulder. He then took her away like Aladdin taking the princess for a ride. The shoulder ride ended by the tap with Kijima confessing his feelings to Ao. He then moved close to her and promised to make her fall for him. This made Ao turn the color of an overripe tomato. All Ao could think of when she got home was her encounter with Kijima. This brought a pervy smile on her face and made her slam the pillow on her face in excitement. The next day, Ao reviewed her result goals for her university, and what she saw made her age rapidly pass out from shock. A few days after, Ao decided to go to the beach and engage in some self-studying before going to join a study group nearby. All her preparations were complete for her studying. However, her number one distraction appeared in front of her with his shirt unbuttoned. Her attention was immediately drawn to his well-defined abs, which made her drool and puff like a bull in heat. She then rejected him when he suggested an outing, but Miyabi appeared behind her like a ghost and threatened her to go and have a good time with Kijima, who also brought his friend. They decided to go on a group outing and Ao went with Miyabi to look for a swimsuit to wear. After many deliberations, they settled on a patterned bikini, which made Kijima spill his drink. He then suggested that they get into the water. As they were in the water, Kijima commented on her swimsuit and she blushed a little. Unknown to her, Miyabi cut a little part of the bikini like a wicked stepmother. As they got out of the water, Ao and Kijima got into a minor argument as she misinterpreted what he said earlier. Just then, her bikini top cut and her plots were in full view of Kijima. They both screamed in alarm like they've seen a ghost, and Ao couldn't attend the study group due to the shock she suffered from having her plots in full view of the beachgoers. Later that night, Ao couldn't get the events of the day out of her mind, and she let out her frustrations by punching. But she was punching the streetlight pole. As she got home, she began to study, but her studies were geared towards the calculation of why Kijima hasn't made a move on her yet. Her response was to do something that would trigger Kijima and reject him once he does. Just then, she received a message from Kijima asking her to come and cheer him on for a football game the next day. She replied positively and then began to search for special food items for teenage boys. The next day, Ao decided to prepare a meal that would make Kijima's hormones run wild. Unknown to her, Her father made extra preparations for the meal by adding his special sauce to it. Meanwhile, Yabe offered to help review her studies so that she can get her failing grades up, but Ao was sad that she might miss seeing Kijima and was caught between studying and boys. She showed up at school with the meal, but Kijima lost a football match which made him really sad. The girls pushed her to go and comfort him and left them alone. She then offered him the meal she prepared and he began to eat with lots of zest as his mood improved. Just then, Kijima became flushed and pushed out of the ground. Going on top of her, he then began to work his way up to her goalpost, but Kijima controlled himself and asked Ao to leave. Ao then became surprised at his decision and asked why. His response strengthened her resolve and she finally asked him to stop asking her out as she couldn't study. Ao recounted her actions towards Kijima and felt guilty for them, but she recounted them to a beauty doll that her father provided and dressed like Kijima. This made her strengthen her resolve once again to leave the house for a university far away. Her father was surprised to hear her say those words again. Meanwhile, in his room, Kijima was studying for the Kodan University entrance exam. However, reading such a high-level book made his head hurt badly. The next day, Ao was bothered by the fact that Kijima won't talk to her even though she asked him not to. While she was reading, she occasionally stole glances at his side. As Kijima's friend went over to ask Ao what happened, Kijima responded in a formal manner befitting an interview and left the class with his friend. That realization made Ao's head hurt and her eyes spin, but she decided to put that aside to study. Later that night, Yabe helped Ao study by first giving her a short test to test her skills, but her mind always wandered back to Kijima. Yabe then decided to punish her with the cane every time she mentioned Kijima. He also vowed to monitor her and prevent her from lagging behind in her studies. Later that night as Yabe was leaving, he ran into Kijima who was coming in. Yabe barred Kijima from entering, and Kijima decided to go the Romeo route and confess his intentions. Yabe agreed and noted that it might be good for Ao to see him. Later in her room, Ao was frustrated and vented out her frustrations on what she thought was the wrapped doll. The doll then turned out to be Kijima hiding under the wrappings, who apologized for how he was making her feel and how he was not making her study. He then offered not to bother her anymore, but this made Ao fall into despair and she reached out to Kijima like Juliet. Kijima immediately wrapped her in his arms like a shawarma. He then carried her to her bed and wanted to begin what two pervy teenagers do when they are alone. Kijima then displayed a feat of gentlemanliness and kissed her on the forehead. This brought butterflies to Ao's belly, but they were killed when she found out that her father and Yabe were recording them. Kijima apologized to Hasanaki and Ao confiscated the tape. Soon after, she escorted him out of the house and Kijima used that opportunity to ask her to study with him. Ao was let down, but she vowed to channel that energy into passing every of her subjects. The sports festival preparations is underway, and the students of Class 1 were asked to submit the sports event they would choose. Some were already deciding to pick the easy ones, while Ao wasn't sure as she was bad at sports. She then overheard Kijima's friends say that he was chosen as a male cheerleader. His friends also boosted his energy by implying that Ao will perform better if he was cheering for her. The realization made Ao decide not to miss the sports festival even if she was hit by a car. Later that night, she asked her father to use the treadmill, which made him surprised that someone who can't run to save herself wants to train. He then offered to come cheer her on alongside Kijima, but she refused. All his suggestions about him coming were shut down by Ao, who told him that she didn't like having him around. This made her father declare that she won't leave the house. She then snitched on him to Yabe, and thus began the father-daughter war. After that night, Ao and her father never exchanged a word, each of them doing their things separately. The sports festival day came and every student was hyped and ready for sports. Ao was looking for her father in the crowd and her heart went out to him. She was lost and thought that she didn't know when Kijima came beside her. She then told him about the fight she had with her father and he advised her on it. He soon left to prepare for his cheerleading. As Ao turned to leave too, she stepped on her father, who told her he only wanted to support her. The sport started with the 800 meters dash. Ao started and her father and Kijima were on the sidelines supporting her like a basketball cheerleading squad. Soon after, Ao lost her lead in the race, and her father unknowingly revealed one of her secrets in front of the whole school as motivation to her. This helped her win the race, but it also made Ao as mad as an oni. The resulting aftermath was Hasanaki being wrapped full of bandages like an Egyptian mummy, and Ao pouring disinfectant on him like she was performing an exorcism. This marked the end of an eventful sports festival and also strengthened Ao's resolve to live by herself as far away from her father as possible. The festival ended and Kijima was back to pestering Ao about them studying together, but she was worried that the study session might end up becoming a full-blown health education lesson. Kijima saw her reaction and assured her that nothing of the sort would happen. He pushed her buttons and she finally agreed after blushing. Kijima then ruined everything by inviting her to his house by the weekend when there'll be nobody at home. That night, Ao went on the internet to search for silk underclothings and finally ordered for a pair. When it got delivered the next day, her father suspected that she might have bought something of that nature, and was sad that she didn't consult his expertise, but she swatted him away like a ping pong ball and ran to her room. The weekend came and Ao and Kijima were in his room alone. Kijima was excited that he had the house to himself while Ao was only interested in mats of the pervy nature. An hour passed and Ao decided to make suggestive comments, but they passed over Kijima's head like breeze. Ao decided to try again in the form of a naughty equation, and Kijima once again was oblivious of the action. Ao decided to try another approach by using another subject, but it still doesn't work. She blurted out her frustration and Kijima was surprised. He then placed a wager that whoever got the highest in their next test has to follow an order from the other person. Ao's mind immediately went to pervy thoughts, but for her order, she imagined that since Kijima was timid and riskless, she will use that to catch him in her trap. Meanwhile, for his order, Kijima asked her to make bento for him like she did after the football match. This took Ao by surprise and left her with a puzzled expression on her face like a minion. Ao then decided to take matters into her own hands to tutor Kijima, fill his belly then fill her pervy thoughts. Unfortunately, she caught a cold and was not able to take the test, causing her to lose out on the bet. Ao blamed it on the new underclothing she got. In a time of need, Ao turned to the only person she could turn to, Miyabi, who was also in competition with Ao for the attention of Kijima. Miyabi teased her that she and Kijima haven't gotten close yet and tried to show her how she thinks it would go. This created a steamy situation in the cafe. As Ao left the cafe, she considered Miyabi's words and vowed to focus on her studies. Meanwhile, Kijima's friend asked him how far he has gone with Ao, and he responds that they only study together. The next day, Kijima saw Ao carrying a lot of books and offered to help her. They both put the books back on the shelf and Kijima asked her to wait for him as he went to change. She was being nice and Kijima found it weird. However, Ao was being nice for a very different reason. As Kijima entered the classroom after changing, he was met with the sight of Ao standing by the window with the curtains billowing behind her like a main character in a shounen manga. He stopped in his tracks and wondered how pretty she was. Kijima was worried about her and Ao eventually told him the truth with a straight face. He closed the gap between them and asked if she wanted to try. A few moments later, their lips came together in an embrace like two hands shaking each other. After a while, they both pulled apart from each other and Ao knelt down like she was about to commit seppuku. That was all she could think about on her way home, even to the point of overfeeding her father till he was about to burst. The next day, Ao saw Kijima and could only pay attention to his mouth even as he asked her about school-related stuff. Unfortunately, she overheard some girls talking about it in class and started to overthink about Kijima's past encounters. Kijima tried to calm her down, but she continued to rise like yeast. She then told him that she was done. This revelation put Kijima in a bind as he was also a noob in many ways. Later that day, Kijima and Ao ran into each other at the library and he took her for a walk. He apologized for not thinking about her perspective. He also offered his services for next time and he immediately took that chance to launch another romantic attack at the ever-studious Hori-Ao with the stars and moon above them in all their glory. Thank you for journeying with us as we explore the story of Hori-Ao and her experiences when it comes to romance and liking a boy. Don't forget to like the video, leave a comment below, subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. And in whatever you do, be honest with yourself and always go for what you want without any hesitation.